It's great to be in the SEC. You're listening to the SEC Recap Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Warren. This is our Game of the Week. No, our Game of the Century episode. Number 1, Tennessee. Number 3, Georgia. SEC East showdown. So much to get into. But before we do, go to Twitter. Give us a follow at SEC Recap. Remember, you can get all of our content. You can get the articles that I write for these podcasts at secrecap.com/articles. It's got all the stats and other info in it. We're available on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, get notified for new episodes each and every week. The stage could literally not be bigger for this SEC East showdown. The de facto SEC East title game. Top-ranked 8-0 Tennessee Volunteers face off in Athens against defending national champs, the 8-0 number 3 Georgia Bulldogs. Game kicks off at 2:30 Central Time, 3:30 Eastern on CBS. Georgia, the defending national champions, they're in familiar territory. Bulldogs have been the SEC East champs 5 times in the last 10 years. However, they have only won the SEC championship once in that time span. That was in 2017. Tennessee has spent this century in the proverbial SEC desert. The Vols have not been to an SEC title game since 2007, a game they lost to LSU. They have only 3 SEC East titles in the last 21 years. Vols have not won an SEC championship since, wait for it, 1998. Kirby Smart and his Bulldogs have grown accustomed to being in the spotlight. They are very comfortable being on top, and they are not going to let the challenge of this moment have any effect on their preparation. The Bulldogs are a smart, composed, disciplined, defensive-minded team of top-tier college football players. Meanwhile, Josh Heupel and his Volunteers are on an historic, meteoric rise of their own. In just a year and a half, Heupel has installed a high-powered, explosive offense that doesn't require top-tier talent to run effectively. The catch? The Vols have a Heisman frontrunner quarterback and a slew of studs at wide receiver, including 2, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, on the Biletnikoff Award watch list. Tennessee's offense is ranked number 1 in the country. Georgia's defense is ranked number 2 in the country. It's the age-old question, what happens when an unstoppable object meets an immovable wall? Well, we get the most epic regular season college football game of this century, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that. Tennessee has the number 1 scoring offense. They're averaging almost 49 and a half points per game, 553 yards, 74 plays a game, and they're running 2.79 plays a minute. They're going fast. Passing offense, they're gaining 353 yards a game. They've got 26 total passing touchdowns on the year. Meanwhile, in the run game, they've got almost 200 yards a game on average. They've also put up about 26 total touchdowns on the ground. They've only thrown 2 interceptions on the year, and one of those was Hendon Hooker. The other was a backup quarterback. And they've lost 6 out of 12 fumbles. So they're not turning the ball over very much. Georgia, not to be discounted, bringing in the number 6 offense in the country in terms of scoring offense. They are averaging 41.8 points per game, 530 yards a game, 73 plays a game. They're running about just a little better than 2 plays a minute. On the passing side, they're putting up 328 yards a game on average. Only 13 passing touchdowns on the season, though. And in the run game, they're averaging above 200 yards a game, but pretty close to Tennessee, just a 3-yard difference. 202 yards a game. They've got 28 total rushing touchdowns on the season. 3 interceptions, lost 6 out of 10 fumbles. So also very, very good about not turning the ball over. I'm giving a slight advantage here to Tennessee for that explosiveness, Heisman caliber quarterback, and those Biletnikoff Award watch list receivers on that Tennessee offense. Meanwhile, defensive side, Tennessee, a respectable number 26 in the country in terms of scoring defense. Vols average 21 points allowed, and they're giving up just under 400 yards a game at 393. Passing defense has not been good, and a lot of people want to point to this stat, and rightfully so. Their passing defense has been allowing 300 yards on average per game. However, they've only given up 10 passing touchdowns on the season. So I think a lot of that is due to game script. A lot of critics want to point to, the number 120 whatever ranked passing defense and say, well, look, they give up so many yards. And yes, that's true. But they're not giving up a ton of touchdowns through the air off of those yards. And I think that's important context to always keep in mind when critics want to point at that stat and say, Tennessee's got a bad defense, Tennessee's got a bad defense. They really don't have a bad defense, although the passing game is that defense's weak spot. In the run game, they're allowing 93 yards per game. Very, very good run defense. They've also given up just 10 rushing touchdowns on the season. This defense has got 9 interceptions. 3 of those came against Kentucky last week, and they've recovered 7 fumbles. But now look at the Georgia side. Number 2 in the country in scoring defense. Bulldogs average just 10.5 points per game allowed and 262 yards a game. They're only giving up 177 through the air and have only allowed 5 tutties on the season. They're giving up just 85 yards in the run game, a little bit better than Tennessee, and have only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns. Meanwhile, they've collected 6 INTs and 3 fumbles. So without a doubt, the advantage here on the defensive side of the ball is going to go to Georgia, but there's a lot more to get into. Let's look at some key injuries. For Tennessee, left tackle Gerald Mincey is probable. He's been out a couple weeks. J.J. Crawford has stepped in for him. Both very good players. I think they prefer Mincey as the starter, but he dressed out last weekend. He will likely be good to go as well this weekend. Kamal Haddon, cornerback, he dressed out last weekend. He will be available for this game. And Christian Charles, cornerback, also probable. Tennessee is very, very healthy on both sides of the ball. They've got all their defense back, ready to go. They've got all those studs on offense back, ready to go. Look out for the Vols on both sides of the ball. At Georgia, tragic story out of Georgia. Nolan Smith, that linebacker, big-time leader on that defense, out for the season with a torn pec. I believe he's having surgery very soon on that. Will not be available rest of season. Amarius Mims on the offensive line had a MCL injury. I think he's been back at work in practice, questionable for the game, though. A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver, questionable with an ankle injury. And Jalen Carter, I think he was back a little bit last week versus Florida, but he's been kind of nursing an ankle injury. I think he will probably be dressed and ready to go this Saturday. So who are the key players in this matchup? Well, for Tennessee, no doubt, it's Hendon Hooker at quarterback. I mean, how could you not view the Heisman frontrunner as the most key player in this matchup? Hooker is going to need a Heisman-level game for the Vols to win on this massive stage. And then you've also got to throw out probably the second biggest name, some might call him the first biggest name on this offense, wide receiver Jalen Hyatt. Bursts out onto the scene when he lit up Alabama for 5 touchdowns. And since then, somehow defenses have just not figured out how to cover this guy, the speedster. You'll see Tennessee go run, pick up a first down, and then at the snap on 1st and 10, Jalen Hyatt has just somehow teleported 10 yards behind the defense, and he's walking in a deep ball touchdown. I mean, he and Hendon Hooker have been automatic on those plays. If he gets a couple of those early, this game could really start to go sideways for the Dogs. Finally here, I'm going to mention the Tennessee secondary. All I'll say is, if the Tennessee secondary that we saw against Kentucky shows up to play against Georgia, Vols should be feeling very comfortable with their chances there in Athens. For Georgia, quarterback Stetson Bennett. This is the guy who nobody believed in. All throughout the regular season of their national championship year, some fans didn't believe that Bennett could get the Dogs to a ship, even with a generationally talented defense. He proved everyone wrong and continues to prove that he is their quarterback. The guy is a competitor. He knows what it takes to win, and I know he will be ready to put that team on his back if it comes down to it on Saturday. And can't forget about this guy, tight end Brock Bowers, by far their most explosive playmaker in the passing game. Look, he's a problem for defenses anytime he touches the ball, but especially if he's in single coverage or in an open field, he is going to make every defense pay. You have to look out for Brock Bowers. And then finally, the defensive line for Georgia. Tennessee's offensive line has been shockingly good this season. I think they've surprised a lot of people. It has really let the Vols lean on their run game, which opens up that explosive pass. This gets talked about a lot. I've talked about it a lot in some of the podcasts where I've covered Tennessee. But most people who just watch those big Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt touchdown bomb highlights on YouTube don't realize that Tennessee runs the ball way more than they pass. There's only been one game this season where they've passed more than they've run. And you don't necessarily think about that being the case when you just see the big, 40-yard, 50-yard, 60-yard touchdowns. But it's true. Tennessee wants to run the ball because that run game opens up that explosive pass. Georgia needs to be able to affect Hendon Hooker and the pocket with their front four. That will let them play back and discourage those explosive plays from Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman. So what I think this game comes down to in the end is two key matchups. One is Tennessee's offense versus Georgia's defense. I'm not breaking new ground here, right? They're both top in the country. Something has to give. Unstoppable object meets immovable wall, right? Georgia has deep talent on their defense, but Tennessee has elite playmakers on offense. And that offensive scheme closes the talent gap a good deal, in my opinion. The second matchup, I think, is the more interesting one to watch. I know everybody's going to be looking at Tennessee's offense, Georgia's defense, but this is the one I'm going to be looking at. Tennessee's defense versus Georgia's offense. Tennessee's defense doesn't have to be perfect to win. They just have to be good enough. Their offense will keep them in games, but can Tennessee's defense be good enough to get a couple of stops or force Georgia to maybe kick a field goal instead of giving up a touchdown? It's the bend, don't break mentality. Georgia's offense is also one of the best, most efficient in the country. It's that efficiency that could make it a long day for the Vols. Georgia doesn't want this game to turn into a shootout, which would favor Tennessee, and they don't want to play from behind. They will want to slow Tennessee early, prevent the Vols from taking a 2-score lead, and let their offense operate without pressure. Tennessee has been tested offensively and defensively this season. Georgia, I'm going to say, has not been tested very much offensively or defensively. ESPN's FBI has Georgia favored at a 74.5% chance to win versus Tennessee at a 25.5% chance to win. Spread has moved quite a bit since it opened at -15, but it currently favors Georgia at -8, as does the money line, -290. The over-under sits at 66 with team totals for Tennessee at 29, a little low for my opinion, and Georgia at 36. I am leaning toward the over 66. Now, most people will want to stay away with that. Maybe you want to take like a first quarter spread bet or a first half. Tennessee in the first half has been really good. I think I saw Tennessee +4 somewhere. I might be more tempted to take that than the over, but I just think 66. If we see both of these teams climb into the 30s, I think a lot of people are going to be wishing they hammered the over on that 66 because we could be getting into shootout territory there. My final prediction. I completely understand picking the defending national champs outright. I don't think anybody would take much issue with that. I also completely understand picking the Vols, who have been crushing expectations all season. And I'd like to introduce a few metrics that have influenced my decision. First, Tennessee is 7-1 against the spread. Meanwhile, Georgia is 4-4. Good teams win, great teams cover. Number 2, 8 points just seems like way too many to give this Tennessee team. Based on team records against the spread, I instantly lean Vols to cover the 8. And then another great stat, my third point here, I saw this yesterday. Kirby Smart is 1-9 when opponents score 30 plus. If Tennessee gets above 30, I think this game starts to look a lot more like a shootout, which heavily favors Tennessee. Tennessee has been tested this season. They've had to fight through the end in a couple of big games, Alabama and Pitt. That Alabama game came down to 2 field goals. Alabama missed theirs, Tennessee made theirs. And Pitt, that game ended up going into overtime. It took a defensive showing from Tennessee to give themselves a chance at victory there. Georgia has not had to do that. So how might the Dogs handle having to pull themselves up off the mat, spit their teeth out, and get back into the fight? We just don't know. As they say, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm just saying I haven't seen it. I've seen Tennessee do exactly that. So I'm picking Tennessee 41, Georgia 38. Close one. I think it comes down to a field goal. I could still see the game going either way, but give me the Vols. 7-1 against the spread. They've been doubted by Vegas all season. They continue to prove everybody wrong. I'm going with the Tennessee Vols to get the win, stay undefeated, and get to their first SEC championship in Atlanta since 2007. The rest of my Week 10 predictions, starting with the noon games. We have Kentucky at Missouri. Give me Kentucky like 24-20 in a game that absolutely nobody wants to watch and that I guarantee probably none of those players even want to play. Then we got Florida at Texas A&M. Man, the sicko in me wants to see the Texas A&M dumpster fire burn a little brighter. But the Aggies finally showed some offense last week. I think this one might be close, like 30-27 close. And I actually think the Aggies could be on the right side of that score on Saturday. Next up, we have Liberty at Arkansas. A really good game. I don't know that this is a game that every SEC team wants to be playing late in the season. I don't know who scheduled this game, but I think Arkansas has bounced back to a degree where they should be able to put Liberty away, but that's not a team that you just want to overlook. Like I said, late in the season, just bad scheduling job there. But give me the Hogs, 37-27. I think Liberty might keep it a ball game, but man, KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders, they've been so good on that run game. I just don't think Liberty can stop that. Then one of the big ones, we've got Alabama, number 6 Alabama at number 10 LSU. You're gonna have to stay tuned to my other game of the week pod and article for that. So check those out. I'll give you my full breakdown and prediction just like I did here for Tennessee, Georgia. Then we got Auburn at Mississippi State. Boy, after everything that's happened with Auburn, this is State's game to lose. So I'm going to pick the Bulldogs by 2 touchdowns. I don't know what the final score will look like. I just don't know that Auburn's going to have much will going into this game. So give me the Bulldogs, couple scores. Last game of the evening, it's sharing a time slot with Alabama, LSU, South Carolina at Vanderbilt. Disappointing loss for South Carolina last week at home to not a very good Mizzou team. Now they travel to Nashville to take on another bottom of the SEC team in Vandy. What is the deal with this one? Let's take 2 of the worst teams to watch in the SEC, put the game at prime time. I don't even care enough to pick a score because the outcome of this game is completely inconsequential to anything in the SEC, and everybody's going to be watching Alabama at LSU. So my final prediction on that one, it doesn't matter. That's going to do it for today's show. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the Game of the Week, Tennessee at Georgia. Please follow us on Twitter at SEC Recap. Check out our merch, bonfire.com/store/SEC Recap. Got some awesome, and I mean awesome, SEC Pride merch. Please, please, please go check that out. It helps out the show a ton. If you're listening in audio form, please go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating and review. It helps us grow the show. If you're listening to us on YouTube, sub to the channel. Smash that thumbs up. Like, we're trying to grow. We want to get to 100 subs on YouTube. I'm going to start doing video stuff very soon. I've already got some from our Four Horsemen podcast on there. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. It's great to be in the SEC right here on the SEC Recap.